Hi, I'm Ahava Tech. Welcome back to What Did You Learn? I'm so excited to have here today Alan Shoebridge. Alan is the Director of Marketing and Communications at Salinas Valley Memorial Healthcare System. Alan, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
We were just giggling because I was saying how that was a very long name for a hospital system. So, Alan, tell us a little bit about how you've spent the last 7,000 years since we went on lockdown.
Well, it's so interesting. For me, I was never really on full quarantine because working at the hospital, even though a lot of my team went remote, I was still there probably about half the time. My office is kind of off-site, but it's been just a really interesting time of kind of managing a remote team, but still being at the hospital. And, we've gone through all these waves and now we're sort of kind of almost, I would say, back to normal. Everyone on my team is vaccinated. Things are opening up where we live, and the hospital is much different condition than even 3 months ago when we were really full capacity with COVID patients. So the turnaround's been kind of amazing, but it's just been this year that's played out. I feel like it's kind of played out in slow motion.
Yeah. Well, you and I were just saying that we met last April and neither one of us could remember how.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this last 3 months that you've been talking about. So what are you finding from your team right now? What do they want to be focused on working on? Do they have COVID and vaccination fatigue? What are your conversations looking like on a daily and weekly basis?
The output of work we were doing was just sort of amazing. I think, we did, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, but we probably did about 2 years of content in about 9 months. And we really stood up a lot of new things. We stood up podcasts, we stood up a blog, we stood up video updates. We were doing things from our chief executive once a week. We were just doing a lot of content and then doing daily content to employees and things like that. And so I do feel like, we needed kind of a wind down. We did sort of build so much infrastructure that we didn't really have, that we were thinking about. Again, a lot of new content avenues that we had thought about doing, we wanted to do. But they were more long range, and we accelerated all of them within about 30 days of COVID. But now they're there; those channels are there, and the process of getting content into them, we've built it so we can kind of dial it down a little bit. But we've got more ways than ever to reach people, which is really good. So I think we're getting to a better spot. We're shifting from being real reactive to being more proactive, more strategic, and getting a little bit back into normal. Not 100% there, but I think we're getting real close.
When you look at, so it's fascinating that you're saying this. So because what I'm hearing people say is, okay, we fed this content beast with COVID, which people were hungry for so long. And now we feel like people don't care anymore about COVID, but they're still paying attention. So what do we now talk to them about? Yeah. And it's really interesting to hear that. When you talk about your standard operating model, and then, that has to have changed, right? I think healthcare has just it's changed, right? We're never going to look at it the same way. So when you say standard operating model, if you had to pull out one thread that you think isn't standard anymore, that you're going to be focusing on strategically, what do you think that would be?
Well, it's interesting, just kind of overall, I always felt and everyone's balance is a little different, but I always felt like I wanted to be about 75% proactive and 25% reactive. And, obviously there's initiatives and things that come up and you can seize on it. But when we shifted into COVID mode, I say that totally flipped. It actually might have been even worse. It might have been 90% just reacting, 10% spending time being proactive. So what I really wanted to get back to, again, is kind of thinking about, getting back to our traditional plan as far as what are our priorities for the year, doing the basics, getting the discussions with our business partners going and all that. And so that's kind of what we've really been able to do. I don't think we're totally back into that really perfect balance of a 75-25, because one thing that's kind of come up is, as we've opened up and the community's opened up, well, we hadn't done any events for I don't know, almost a year, right? So now everything is kind of coming back, and it's all coming back at once. And I think the sustainable piece is going to be there's a lot of energy, people want to do everything right now, and actually getting back to how do we take all those things we want to do and spread it out in a way that's sustainable?
One of the things that we've been talking to our, partners about is, let's take the care out of healthcare and let's just talk about health. Mm-hmm. The pandemic really rolled out a red carpet for us to really be able to sort of focus on how do you take care of your health. Yeah. But hospitals make money from healthcare. They don't make money from health. how do you think Salinas and other organizations like yours are going to approach thinking in this new paradigm? Or do you think we're just going to go right back to like, okay, we're going to charge you for a lung biopsy, we're going to get you for bariatric surgery? You know, where do you think it's going to go?
I think probably like different organizations are going to be different on the spectrum. And part of it too is going to be, what do the physicians kind of embrace? Because I know still in some places, telehealth, telemedicine, like it worked really well. But do we really want to keep it going? Like, or do they prefer to go back to in person? There's going to be things like that that are strategic and can depend on the culture of an organization. I think, for us at our organization, we really did come out of COVID with our CEO saying, let's keep the momentum going. Like things we learned, things we did differently, like we need to keep it going. How are we going to keep it going? So we really like, for instance, upped our focus on, being more accessible, being more, I kind of hate to say it because it's trite, but like consumerism driven, right? Consumer driven, which is the right thing to do. But, sometimes people use that as a catch all for like every single thing and it loses the meaning. But, it's always going to be a balancing act. But I do think for a lot of organizations that have made, that proactive health management part of their mission and vision and then communicated or committed to things after COVID, I think it's going to be more successful than those that are just kind of like, well, we treated this as a blip on the road and now we're going to go back to normal. I do think just every organization is going to be a little different on that spectrum.
I think that's such a good answer, but I think what you said at the end is really the key piece, which is that if you get into health management, in 20 years from now, you'll still be standing. There's just no doubt about it. When you talk about, the infrastructure, the content infrastructure that you stood up and the channels and reaching people, podcasts and blog and things like that, I want to ask two questions. The first was what was most successful in terms of your team's feeling about the ROI on it? And which channel did you find most helpful for actually listening to what was happening in the community?
And it's not necessarily a channel specifically, but I'll get one of the things I think was kind of surprising and to see the engagement was when we started doing Facebook Live events with our physicians. And in our community, we have a heavily Hispanic makeup, right? Kind of in the core area around our hospital. And the reaction to the Spanish language content and the Spanish language events was really strong. And that's not something we had ever really, we had never done any Facebook Live events ever. We were a very like in-person event heavy organization, which was great. We always got good turnout, but during COVID, you couldn't do it. So we really pivoted and started doing these, live events with our physicians, and we put a lot of effort into it. So, and we looked at what other people were doing, and some were just like they set up a camera and they just go, and I think that's fine. But for us, we wanted to put a little more like polish on it. We built out a little part of our, we have a studio we use. We built it out. We made it look nice. We kind of put a lot of effort into it, and it really did pay off. And especially when we did the Spanish language events, like the thirst for information there was really strong because for the Spanish speakers, there was not a lot of good information coming out. There's not a lot of good sources. Who do they trust? So we were able to leverage that, and I think that's been a huge, fantastic numbers in terms of attendance and participation. And tying it back to a true ROI is tough because again, we're not like capturing all those people who attended, but
yeah,
we know from the comments, we know from the questions that asked that people are asking questions that at the height of the pandemic, even if one or two or three or four people get a question answered that prevents them from doing something dangerous or holding an in-person event. I mean, we had people asking about, well, can I still hold a baby shower? And our doctor's like, absolutely not. Well, that might have prevented 10 COVID cases in the community. Who knows, right? And so,
more than that.
Yeah, and so that was really big. And then we did a lot of ramping up on video too, and got internally our CEO talking to employees once a week. Often we piggyback on that, did a community message from him once a week. Those are really good. Lots of interaction, engagement. Again, hard for a traditional ROI, but you can see the reach, the views, the comments, the kind of just positioning of our organization as a trusted expert was really strong. And then lastly, I think the other, kind of really new thing was the podcast. And those are really great too. And I've just enjoyed all that content because it's allowed us to do kind of an inside out strategy where we use that content to engage and inform our employees first, and then immediately release it to the community. Because so much mileage you can get out of that content that maybe in the past you would have think this only has an external audience, but really the internal and external audience kind of became one during COVID, and that's still how we're approaching it.
I think that's great. I have heard more people say I learned more about my internal communications arm than I ever have before. And I really do think it was always the audience we were told to pay attention to, but let's be honest, it was mostly the audience that got ignored unless it was something legal or, like that kind of thing. So I think that's cool and interesting. It's interesting that you're talking about the Spanish language and the listening, like seeing the awareness. And one of the things that we're sort of talking about a lot is we have to move away from this idea of the provider and the patient dyad. Like we're too tied to that. What we don't realize is that healthcare is influenced by so many different inputs. And it's really the community that's that triad, right? And then you add in family and you add in another doctor, perhaps if it's a specialty kind of situation. And now you're looking at, a complex set of decision trees. Do you feel, and so the reason that it made me think of that was because you talked about like that one question could have saved 10 people. One of the things that I'm talking about is an influencer could be one mom. It could be one mom who says to another mom, hey, go check this out. And sometimes I feel like, were we too focused on like the ROI of these huge numbers? And I love hearing you say like, no, we were trying to do the right thing. And by doing the right thing, we were building awareness in that way. Right. Are you going to be able to continue to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. I mean, so I mentioned those live events, and then, we're basically around kind of setting those up once a month now. And we're going into more traditional subjects. So this month we've got women's health. Next month we've got men's health. We're doing those things that I think traditionally we'd probably be pushing out a message in ways we did before, but now we're adding to that and we're doing some more things. I do think you made an interesting point too about how there's all these multiple touch points in the healthcare system, and you kind of do want your primary care doctor to be the quarterback, right? I mean, that's kind of how they describe it, but you have a team that's all around you that helps out. And so I do think that, there's so much value in getting people to establish the primary care relationship because it's just what they need. It's the right thing to do, because if you wait till it's too late, then you don't have that sort of quarterback. Like maybe you're just going to go right into the hospital. And unfortunately, that's what some people do, right? And they don't have a primary care doctor they can go back to afterwards, and they have to figure it out in the back end. The more you can get ahead of people before they absolutely need it, the better, because it's just going to be easier on them to navigate the more experience they have. I mean, that's the hard thing is, as people get thrown into the system, if they haven't really done much with their healthcare, it's really confusing. I mean, it's confusing for anyone, but it's especially confusing if you don't have even a primary care doctor to help you out and sort of coordinate what you need.
Alan, you talked about how you were in the office half and half. Are you calling everyone back?
Almost everyone that was like fully remote is sort of back to at least a hybrid model. There's, I think, a few departments that might be still transitioning, but I would say too, what we learned in talking to other leaders and everything is there's still a lot of value in having some percentage of your interaction be in person. And correct. There was times where for a couple of weeks, it was like me and one other person in our office space. And when other people would come in, you would just know there's like a lot more energy. You can have those kind of quick conversations a lot more naturally. But I just think the future is sort of a hybrid model where you give people flexibility and you have make some time and space to meet in person too. I think that's really a great idea. I think a lot of companies are embracing that.
Alan, you seem to have learned a lot. And it's very clear that you're very thoughtful about your strategy. So what did you learn, and what, your CEO said, we're going to keep it. We're going to extend these learnings. We're going to keep it. So what'd you learn, and what are you going to extend?
I do think maybe it's really around the fact that the internal audience is so important and really just now needs to be considered as sort of you just kind of have one audience and it's everyone, and you figure out the messaging cadence and you figure out the timing and you do it that way. Because I think before, again, like you were saying, I've always considered employees to be your organization's best brand ambassadors, but we weren't channeling a lot of content to them that would help them do that, I think. So the idea I think that we really want to keep forward again is putting all our content out to them first. And that we did that really well during COVID. And, example would be, as soon as we record a podcast and have it ready to go, like the first promotional pitch goes out to the employees because it's one of the doctors talking about something that we're doing as an organization, or it's our CEO talking about, why we've changed our policies or whatever those things might be. Same thing with like the video content. So again, treating that audience as like there are our true brand ambassadors, because if they go out to the community and someone asks them a question and goes, oh, why are you guys restricting your visiting hours? Or why are you guys shutting down this service? Or why are you not having this event? We kind of need to prepare them to answer that question. I think by sharing our content and our strategy with the employees, it's the best way to arm them to really be advocates, to really understand. Because my biggest fear the whole time was someone, going to a family member that works at our organization and saying, again, why are you doing this? And the person going, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. We knew how important it was for people to be the brand ambassador, give a good experience, but I don't think we arm them with the right content all the time, and as often as we are doing it now.
I think that's it's such a great thing to say. Like, you have to you can expect people to be brand ambassadors, but if you don't give them the information that they need to do that. Anyway, Alan, where can people find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I also have a website, alanshoebridge.com. I do blogs and everything. So yeah, I'd love to connect with people. Happy to do it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.